Julius Caesar didn't die in an epic battle against enemy armies. He died betrayed, surrounded by the men who had sworn to protect him. On March 15th, 44 BC, in the heart of the Roman Senate, he was stabbed 23 times. Why did this murder happen? What did it really mean for Rome? And what lessons can we learn today from that betrayal? We'll journey through his rise, the conspiracy, the ignored omens, the assassination, the chaos that followed, and the philosophical legacy that still echoes today. Each chapter will separate documented fact from speculation, leading us to reflect on how these ancient tragedies continue to mirror our own lives. Rome, 100 BC. Gaius Julius Caesar is born into a patrician family linked, according to tradition, to the goddess Venus. There's no historical proof of that divine lineage, but in Rome, perception was power. He grew up in a city torn apart by civil wars between Marius and Sulla, where loyalty shifted with the wind and ambition was the only constant. From a young age, he stood out for his eloquence, his prodigious memory, and his ability to win allies. Plutarch tells us that at 25 he was captured by pirates. When they demanded 20 talents for ransom, he replied, "No, ask for 50. My life is worth more." After being freed, he returned with a fleet, captured them, and had them crucified, though, according to Suetonius, he slit their throats first to ease their suffering. Mercy or theater? Probably both. Because Caesar understood that power isn't maintained by the sword alone, but by the narrative. His campaigns in Hispania, and especially in Gaul between 58 and 50 BC, made him a legend. His own commentaries on the Gallic War, written in the third person, as if an impartial witness were narrating his exploits, aren't just a military record but a masterpiece of propaganda. They document victories, betrayals, and massacres, but also a clear vision. Rome must expand, and he is its instrument. Every loyal legion, every conquered province, every accumulated fortune increased his influence in the capital, and that, for the senatorial elite, was an existential threat. As Marcus Aurelius would write centuries later in his Meditations, power doesn't change a man, it reveals him. And Caesar, revealed, was ambitious to the extreme. In 49 BC, the Senate, dominated by Pompey and the Optimates, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. He knew that without his legions, he'd be vulnerable to trials, exile, or worse. Facing this crossroads, he made the riskiest decision of his life, to cross the Rubicon River, the boundary separating Gaul from Italy. Crossing it with weapons was high treason. According to Suetonius, as he did so, he pronounced, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. Though modern historians debate whether he said those exact words, the act itself was irreversible. It unleashed civil war. He defeated Pompey at Pharsalus in 48 BC. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was murdered by the pharaoh's advisors who believed they'd win Caesar's favor. Plutarch recounts that Caesar, upon seeing his former ally's head, wept. Not from affection, but from symbolism. Rome no longer reconciled its great men. It eliminated them. He returned to Rome not as a general, but as dictator. In 46 BC, the Senate named him Dictator for 10 years. 2 years later, in 44 BC, they proclaimed him Perpetual Dictator, an unprecedented title. Many saw it as the end of the Republic. But Caesar didn't govern like a classic tyrant. Documented by Dio Cassius and Suetonius, he implemented profound reforms. He created the Julian calendar, which corrected the inaccuracies of the old system and which, with slight modifications, we still use today. He expanded the Senate from 600 to 900 members, including Gauls and Hispanics, breaking the Italian aristocracy's monopoly. He pardoned enemies like Cicero, Mark Antony, and even Brutus, whom he appointed urban praetor. He distributed land to veterans and grain to the people. The people loved him. The elite feared him. Cicero, in private letters, wrote, This man doesn't seek glory. He seeks to reign. And although Caesar publicly refused the crown during the Ludi Martials, as Suetonius confirms, his gestures suggested otherwise. He wore purple robes, sat on a golden throne in the Senate, and allowed divine cult to be rendered to him in the provinces. Was it arrogance? Or was it a strategy to stabilize a crumbling state? The Stoics would say that power isn't evil in itself, but demands virtue proportional to its magnitude. While Caesar reformed the state, a group of senators began secretly conspiring. The core was formed by Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Cassius Longinus, and Decimus Junius Brutus. Brutus was the most symbolic, descendant of Lucius Junius Brutus, the legendary expeller of kings in 509 BC, and also Caesar's adoptive son. Plutarch narrates that Caesar, upon seeing him among the senators, would often say, "Brutus, when will you do what you must do?" Some interpret this as an invitation, others as a warning. The truth is that Brutus was divided. He loved Caesar, but he loved the idea of a free Rome more. Cassius, on the other hand, was a convinced Republican, but also a resentful man. He'd been pardoned after Pharsalus, and he hated, depending on his enemy's clemency. Decimus, Caesar's close friend, was the most dangerous. He knew his habits, his routines, his weaknesses. They met in private houses, swore oaths with daggers, and called themselves the Liberators. They believed that by killing Caesar, the people would acclaim them as heroes. But they underestimated something fundamental. The Roman people no longer trusted the Senate. They'd seen how the elite grew rich, while the streets filled with unemployed. To them, Caesar wasn't a tyrant. He was their protector. In the days before March 15th, omens accumulated. His wife, Calpurnia, had a recurring dream. She held Caesar's lifeless body. The soothsayer Sporina warned him, "Beware the Ides of March." The priests, upon sacrificing an animal, found no heart, an ominous sign, according to Roman augurs. Suetonius confirms these accounts. Caesar hesitated. He even ordered the Senate session canceled. But Decimus Brutus convinced him, "Will you let them mock you for believing in dreams?" Caesar yielded. Was it arrogance? Or was it, as Dio Cassius suggests, a Stoic resignation to an inevitable fate? Because the Stoics taught that we shouldn't fear destiny, but accept it with dignity. On March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar entered the Curia of Pompey. He was surrounded by senators pretending to request favors. Tullius Cimber pleaded for clemency for his exiled brother and, in doing so, grabbed his toga. It was the signal. Gaius Casca stabbed him in the back. Caesar turned and said, "Casca, this is treason." Then, according to Suetonius, upon seeing Brutus among the attackers, he murmured in Greek, "Kai su, teknon." You too, child? Plutarch repeats this version, but modern historians, like Mary Beard, point out it's unlikely. It doesn't appear in contemporary sources and sounds too dramatic, like something from a Greek tragedy. Be that as it may, Caesar fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, his former rival, covered in wounds. He received 23 stab wounds. Only one was fatal. The assassins went out into the streets with bloody daggers, shouting, "Freedom!" They expected to be acclaimed, but the people remained silent. Then came the funeral. Mark Antony, a skilled orator and Caesar's ally, delivered a funeral speech that Plutarch and Appian describe in detail. He didn't directly attack the conspirators. Instead, he read Caesar's will. He bequeathed gardens to the people and 300 sesterces to each Roman citizen. Then he showed the blood-stained toga with the tears from each stab. The effect was devastating. The crowd, moved by emotion, burned down the houses of Brutus and Cassius. Rome erupted in violence. The conspirators fled. The Stoic lesson is clear. Masses guided by passion are unpredictable. Only self-control and reason allowed just governance. Chaos gave way to a new civil war. Octavian, Caesar's young great-nephew, adopted as a son in his will, returned from Apollonia to claim his inheritance. He was barely 18, but showed astonishing coldness. He allied with Mark Antony and Lepidus in the Second Triumvirate. Together they pursued the assassins. In 42 BC, they defeated them at the Battle of Philippi. Brutus and Cassius committed suicide. Octavian, who would later call himself Augustus, became Rome's first emperor. Thus, the crime committed to save the Republic destroyed it completely. The irony is cruel, but not unique in history. Often, those who act with the moral certainty of doing the right thing end up causing the opposite. Caesar's death wasn't just the end of a man. It was the collapse of a system that could no longer sustain itself. The Republic had been eroded by decades of corruption, inequality, and political violence. Caesar tried to reform it, but his solution, personal power, generated more fear than stability. The conspirators believed that by eliminating the man, they'd save the institution. But the institution was already dead. Only the corpse remained. What lesson can we draw today? First, that power without virtue is dangerous, but also that opposition without empathy is blind. Second, that institutions aren't saved by coup d'etat, but by inclusive reforms. Third, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Every generation faces its own Ides of March, its own decisions between loyalty and duty, between fear and courage. Julius Caesar died betrayed. Rome lost its republic and gained an empire that would last centuries. But the real tragedy wasn't his death. It was that all the actors, Caesar, Brutus, Cassius, the Senate, the people, believed they were doing the right thing. Was Brutus a hero or a traitor who deceived himself? If this story made you think, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Share your opinion in the comments. Your voice not only enriches the debate, but helps more people discover these lessons from the past. Because deep down, we all face our own Ides of March, and how we respond defines not only our destiny, but that of those around us.